Right, so The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and the first one is about the moral compass, and the character of the moral compass is the ruler, which in this case happens to be me. So this is all about judgment. Does the person distinguish between right and wrong? Is it a moral and a just crusade? Does the ruler genuinely care for and lead the community? Because if those things are in place, then the community will follow the ruler. And this particular instance then, and it stems from Taoism about the true path. So in this instance, this is about the training of the joy of competition, of loving the moment which is packed with pressure. And to some extent, the outcome, whether it's a win or lose, is secondary. This is about the joy of training and competition and the joy of being in the moment of pressure. What it's not about is about cheating, is about pushing the boundaries of gamesmanship over the boundary. And it's certainly not just about the improvement aspects of hitting balls and getting more consistent and more powerful. It's much more important than that, and this is the true and the just crusade of the ruler with the moral compass. The second aspect of planning is something called heaven. So heaven really is about the conditions, night or day, hot or cold, wet, dry, the changing of the seasons, the wind. So when we play our matches, jet lag comes into it as well. What time you're playing. So all these things need to be planned for. So when you rock up on court, your right mentality, and importantly, you trained under those exact conditions and honed your game to be of maximum effectiveness. The third part of planning is the big one. So this is about earth. So earth obviously means the type of surface, grass, hard, clay. But it's also about setting up the surface so you're playing under your conditions and getting people into your killing zones and extracting that point. And we remember that tennis is mainly made up of errors. How to force errors, how to receive unforced errors. And they account for around 70% of all points. And 30% of points are winners, and half of those winners are accidental. It's closer to the line than you went, you happen to hit your sweet spot. So at least 85% of all points are in the big pond of forced errors, unforced errors, and lucky winners. So we should never be striving for winners unless that's the only thing you can go for. So that's one criteria. Controlling momentum is also critical under earth. So when you have momentum, you need to be forcing momentum and going things quicker. And when the momentum is the other way, you need to slow it down and stop it dead, and then turn momentum your way. And we teach this. And probably the last thing then is deception. Is that sport a la war is often won by surprises. So how can we get the right balance between the proper execution of the tactic and the shots, totally regardless of where the opponent is, and still having some deception? Because what you can't be doing is trying to deceive your opponent when all you're doing is deceiving yourself. If you hit the ball wide and the opponent is running back into the court, it is irrelevant how fast the opponent is going and how much ground they're covering up. You just need to execute. And if you're now watching them speeding up so that at the last moment you may or may not hit the ball behind them, all you're doing is losing your effectiveness. So a number of ways that we can do deception. One is in feigning of giving up, feigning of being exhausted and tired. And there are other things that you can legitimately feign. Another way of deception, particularly in the first few points of the first game, is to deceive people about your intent. And they will register that in the first point and be unsure probably for the rest of the match just because you started off with that. So if you're serving, for instance, you can look with your eyes on one area, but actually at the same time your brain is looking at a particular spot and honing in on it. That is all very possible. And including for your serve, setting up of your preparation. We teach a very solid, basic execution. And to some extent, the opponent could read where you're going to hit the ball. So you can set yourself up very obviously for serving wide, and just with a small change in the throw up and the small change in the hitting zone, hit it down the middle. They will now be confused because they were so obviously going to serve wide, and now it was down the middle. So now every time that you set up, they won't know where you're going to hit the ball. Remembering, of course, that we train 1-2 shot combinations. So the aim of the first shot is to set up the second shot, and it's done in an automated way. We don't do one shot, wait for what they're going to give us, and then react and be spontaneous and do our best. So doing a 1-2 shot combination, we will be able to do what we call forced anticipation. You will be able to see by their body shape and what they like to do where their next shot is going to come from, and hence be there early. And probably the last thing to say on deception and surprise is that provided you have trained it, you can have an ace up your sleeve. So at critical points of set or even match points, you can bring out of your pocket a particular 1-2 shot execution that you haven't done before. That will take them by surprise, and all will be well. And my particular favourite is one of two things for serving, which is either a slow sliced into their left hip, come up to the net and put the volley away, and that is my preferred ace up my sleeve that I haven't done for the rest of the match. The fourth part of planning is a general, and the general is yourself. So Sun Tzu says that a general is not a jobbing soldier. A general, in their terms, is a scholar, a gentleman, and a philosopher, much more than a jobbing soldier. So in our instance, this is all about training. And you could train perfectly well. Are you a 1 hour a week big point player, or a 2 hour a week big point player, or 10 hours? The amount of hours you spend does make a difference. So even though we hack all the rest of the training and you get many more results in a shorter space of time, nevertheless, if you're practicing your big point player craft 1 hour a week or 5 hours a week, that will make a difference. 1 hour a week over 3 years plus homework has changed one of our players up 4 levels in a UTR rating, which is, extraordinary. So if you're not a jobbing soldier, if you are a gentleman, a scholar, a philosopher, somebody that studies and trains the art of tennis, then it will lead to knowing yourself as a particular type of leader, a general, and what you're capable of. And in a little study I did with Angus Mugford and Nick Bollettieri a little while ago, there were 3 characteristics to train for. One was about meticulous of word, which really comes to integrity. Are you careful what you say that comes out of your mouth? Do you deliver what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it? And if anything comes up that is just Herculean impossible, do you communicate and give a new promise? Second part of leaders, of generals, is about being coachable. And we see it all the time with the Federers and the Nadals and the Djokovic's and the Murrays, that they get to a certain level and then have an injury or a psychological problem and go from hero to zero, and then go back as one of the world's greatest and be open-minded and retrain themselves and get coaching. And the third thing as a general is, are you a leader? As a sports person, do you not just compete against the opposition, but do you give back to the sport? Do you leave something behind? The All Blacks would say, do you add value and leave the jersey better than you found it? And the last part of planning is about regulation. So according to Sun Tzu, this is about marshalling of the army, about logistics, about supplies, about making sure that the army can get to where it needs to fight to the best of its capabilities and come back. So in our world, this is all about testing and choosing the right equipment for you. Do you just play with the racket because you played with a racket? It would be good to find out the right weight, the right balance. What about choosing the right strings, the right composition and the right tensions? And your tennis shoes? And nutrition and hydration. Are you giving the body what the body needs in order to perform at its best, or are you handicapping yourself? And then lastly, this is about your program of work. If you don't have a plan, then you're just going to train on an ad hoc basis. So you need to have a plan, which is based on your objectives, which is based on your strengths to enhance even further to be really weapons of mass destruction, and at the same time work on your weaknesses so your weaknesses become neutralized. So that's regulation, and those are the 5 points of planning of The Art of War by Sun Tzu and how it relates to us as tennis players. And this is just about the planning. Next chapters we'll move on to other subjects.